Welcome to the future. PBS Digital.
Frontline is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
It's everywhere you look.
You cannot walk down the street without being bombarded.
They call it a clutter crisis.
Consumers are like roaches. You spray them, and after a while it doesn't work anymore. We develop immunities.
And the multi-billion-dollar advertising industry is in a desperate struggle to break through.
We don't just come forward with what we want to sell, we engage you with things that you want.
Advertisers have blurred the line between programming and product.
It's advertising that people not only will tolerate, but will actually go in search of.
The way God and Madison Avenue intended.
But how is advertising affecting our lives and the world around us?
Once a culture becomes entirely advertising friendly, it ceases to be a culture at all.
Tonight on Frontline.
I'm sure people ask you this all the time. What about the environment?
Correspondent Douglas Rushkoff takes you inside the changing world of the Persuaders.
A spring night in New York City. Two men hunt for just the right building.
We're always looking for a new wall to kind of do our thing on.
They may not look it, but these guys are preparing a guerrilla operation.
Kind of just scope out for a good location, and wherever we end up, we end up. This is where we're going in, this construction site right here.
At last they find the building they've been looking for. They line up the target in their sights. What's this covert mission all about? It's a new kind of urban warfare. A sneaker company's all-out battle for our attention.
You cannot walk down the street without being bombarded. You stand in an elevator looking at advertising in the corner of the elevator car, and you go to play golf and you go to pick the ball up out of the cup and there's an ad in the bottom of it, and you look up at the sky and there's skywriting, and you look at a bus passing and there's advertising, and you walk in Times Square and you go, is this Las Vegas on the Hudson? Am I trapped inside a pinball machine?
Welcome to the new American metropolis. Somewhere beneath all these ads is the city I grew up in. But over the last 20 years, it's grown a second skin, a twinkling membrane of commercial messages. Advertisers have become prospectors for new space in an ever more crowded landscape. Even a subway tunnel becomes the backdrop for an American Express promotion. But advertisers have a big problem. The more messages they create, the more they have to create to reach us. It's led to a vicious circle of clutter.
They're the ones who make clutter. They are therefore also the ones who are always trying desperately to break through the clutter. That's the line you always hear in ad agencies. We can break through the clutter with this. Well, every effort to break through the clutter is just more clutter.
I have a quote in my book from an advertising executive who says consumers are like roaches. You spray them, and after a while it doesn't work anymore. We develop immunities.
So what's an advertiser supposed to do? Stop advertising? That's the one thing they know they can't do, because the moment they stop trying to persuade us, we forget about them.
Once you're in the game, you can't stop, if for no other reason that the competition will eat you alive.
What advertising has always wanted to do is not simply to suffuse the atmosphere, but to become the atmosphere. It wants us not to be able to find a way outside of the world that it creates for us.
So this is the way our world fills up with advertising. For years, I've been studying and writing about what I call the persuasion industry. I've even worked in it. But I still can't say for sure where all this is headed. Where will the advertising arms race lead? To a world made of marketing? And what would that mean for us? I set out on a tour through the modern machinery of selling to meet some of the persuaders up close. My first stop? A downtown New York storefront.
I'm not singing.
I've been invited to a hip party. Or something that looks like one.
They serve this on planes?
What this really is the opening salvo in a marketing blitz for a new airline. They call themselves Song. Song is a subsidiary of Delta Airlines, but you won't find any mention of Delta here. Delta is old-fashioned air travel, and Song is their way of persuading us that they can compete with hip, low-cost carriers like JetBlue.
A lot of people ask us, you got to be crazy. You're starting an airline in the worst environment in the U.S., in the history of U.S. commercial aviation. And we were, and we are.
That process gets more and more complex.
Delta broke off a team of their best marketers and told them to start from scratch.
Also, what's the kind of the creative idea that runs through each of these?
The first thing the Song team decided was that it wasn't enough just to launch a new airline. To get our attention, they had to invent a new culture around flying.
Which is to sort of capture consumers' imagination by...
But how do you do that?
Talk to me a little bit about why you chose the things you did. And
Song started with a trusted tool, the focus group.
the homework was choose images, words, things that capture what might be your ideal experience of traveling by air.
Before long, Song's research yielded a nugget. There was a large group of flyers whose needs and desires were being ignored. Women.
The food, I think they could improve a lot.
It was an incredible insight to say that this could be the first airline that had, a real, understanding, much deeper understanding of women and women's interests.
The Song team created a detailed profile of their target consumer and even gave her a name, Carrie.
She's got 3 children, a husband. They both work. They have an SUV and a sports car, Neiman Marcus credit cards, but she shops at Target. She has got a propensity to read kind of high-end literature, but she finds guilty pleasure in People magazine. And she doesn't have an airline.
Here's our organic menus.
Song would have low fares, organic food, and more entertainment options. But most importantly, it would forge a real connection with women.
That's what they're going to look like. Excellent.
To pull that off, Song turned to a pro, Andy Spade. Spade is the co-creator of the Kate Spade Company, a multi-million-dollar line of fashion accessories that caters to women like Carrie.
I think early on when you're shaping a new brand, you need those brand visionaries. He's got a gift, and he's had it from the very first time we started working with him, and that's why we love him so much.
What are they going to do in this day?
He gets us more than we get ourselves.
Like the 8-track player and this TV.
I bring ideas, kind of visualize ideas that companies have and give them kind of a substance and a texture and a life that they may not know how to create. And I bring that, I take their idea or their point of view, and I try to create this make it into something that's bigger, maybe emotional, maybe optimistic, maybe classical, maybe, happy.
I think that I'll just start by introducing kind of the concept and what it is.
Spade's been charged with producing Song's TV campaign, the first impression the airline will make on many Americans.
All right, so why don't we start? Really create a campaign for Song that was spirited, that delivered on the benefits that we think are the most important. Do it in a way that's emotional. Do it in a way that I think is optimistic, because we believe that's part of the Song ethos. So we're going to take you through 5 different different concepts and 5 different commercials that deliver on 5 different benefits, which we believe differentiate Song from everyone else.
Spade is proposing to downplay the airline's new features in favor of something much more intangible, its soul.
There's a book called Lovers here, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book Lovers. I'll pass it around. But there's these sweet, sweet images. We were kind of inspired by this a few times of just people together, and mainly Godard and Truffaut movies and all those old French New Wave films, and then their American films.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown.
Spade's commercials will show no planes, no travelers, no low fares, no airline. This is an enormously risky strategy. These commercials, as planned, will consume almost a third of Song's $12 million marketing budget. If the campaign doesn't connect, Song will just become part of the noise, and Delta, at the brink of bankruptcy, cannot afford for its new venture to fail. At least one member of Song's team is nervous.
Well, the risk is you invest an inordinate amount of money behind a message that is a fairly ethereal message that, as they say, doesn't feed the bulldog. I mean, this is a business. This isn't an art form. So we have got to ensure that it's communication that drives commerce, not just makes people feel good. The number one purchase driver for this category is, in fact, first price. The strategy is the everyday low-priced airline that happens to have more style and everything else that we're doing.
The more we pulled back and tried to make it a very, very kind of literal delivery on a benefit, it lost that emotion, and we wanted to keep that emotion.
Spade isn't backing off. He's not content just to convey information. He's aiming for something bigger.
At the end of the day, you want to become a part of culture. And when you get to that point, you've created a huge success. And that's what all the great, I think, companies have done, from Virgin to Apple to others.
And I think by spending 25 seconds on the style and the spirit, this is a void in your category, and you have to get there first. That's more important than really building a spot around low fare. I mean, everyone is going to be low fare.
What really differentiates something from another thing? I think it's creating kind of something that communicates to people on another level, beyond a logical level.
The question is an advertising classic. Should the pitch be aimed at the head or the heart? How creative can an ad get and still be an ad?
Someone once wrote a book called Advertisements for Myself. That's what advertising is. It's advertising for the guys who are creating it far more than it is for the guys who are paying for it. They're trying to win awards, they're trying to make more money, they're trying to build their own portfolio, they're trying to get a better job, they're trying to make up for the fact that they're in advertising and not directing films or doing stand-up comedy or painting paintings or whatever they would prefer to do, I guarantee you. And the consequence is a lot of advertising that's quite extravagant in its look or very clever and entertaining and funny, but which doesn't do the thing that advertising is supposed to do, which is make you want to buy the good or service that's nominally being advertised.
Look at the coffee as it gets darker and stronger.
Not so long ago, the high-concept ads of today were all but unthinkable.
Soap has never smelled this good before, and neither have you.
Ads laid claim to real, tangible differences between one product and another.
What were brands? They were based on what I call ER words. Whiter, brighter, cleaner, stronger.
Smoothest, mildest, tastiest cigarette.
Watch any commercials on American TV and you'll see these words up in the first 3 seconds, hammered remorselessly into your brain.
But at some point, these words ceased to have meaning. We no longer believed that one product was any brighter or cleaner than any other.
Everything works now, you know. French fries taste crisp, coffee's hot, beer tastes good. Unless you live in America, and then, you got to live with what you get. But all these things now are table stakes.
By the early 1990s, a new approach to marketing came to the fore. One that leapt right over what the product did to what the product meant.
It's not just a car, it's an expression of the culture, an aesthetic that is connected somehow to nature, infinity.
These were the super brands like Nike, Starbucks, the Body Shop, and what they noticed these brands had in common was that they were they were engaging in a kind of a sort of pseudo-spiritual marketing. Nike said that they were about the meaning of sports, but more than that, that they were about transcendence through sports. Starbucks said that they were about the idea of community, a place that is a third place, that is not home, not work. Benetton was, of course, selling multiculturalism, racial diversity.
This lesson, that a brand could forge an emotional, even spiritual bond with today's cynical consumer, wasn't lost on corporate America.
What are you saying with your Chinette plates?
This wave of corporate epiphanies in the mid-90s where all these companies, were told, what your problem is you don't have a big idea behind your brand. So they would hire high-priced consultants and they would have these kind of corporate sweat lodges and gather around the campfire and sort of try to channel their inner brand meaning. And they would emerge from these processes sort of flushed and say, Polaroid isn't a camera, it's a social lubricant.
When I was a brand manager at Procter & Gamble, my job was basically to make sure the product was good, develop new advertising copy, design the pack. Now a brand manager has an entirely different kind of responsibility. In fact, they have more responsibility. Their job now is to create and maintain a whole meaning system for people through which they get identity and understanding of the world. Their job now is to be a community leader. It is the big monopolistic.
Ad strategist Douglas Atkin, an expert on the relationship between consumers and brands, says he had a eureka moment one night during a focus group.
I was in a research facility watching 8 people rhapsodize about a sneaker. And I thought, where is this coming from? This is, at the end of the day, a piece of footwear. But the terms they were using were evangelical. So I thought, if these people are expressing cult-like devotion, then why not study cults? Why not study the original? Find out why people join cults and apply that knowledge to brands.
I'm loyal to this practice because it's done so much for me.
If Atkin could find what pushed a person from mere fan to devoted disciple, perhaps he could market that knowledge.
Most of the people I discuss the WWF with know that it's not a sport. Right. It's a masculine ballet.
So he compared dozens of groups he considered cults with so-called cult brands, from Hare Krishna to Harley Davidson.
If you're smart and kind of individual, that's what you drive.
From Falun Gong to Mac.
I think there's something about Mac users, like they get it.
We just had discovered something. They realize there are other people like them and they cooperate on certain projects. And it's part of belonging to the tribe.
And the conclusion was this, is that people, whether they're joining a cult or joining a brand, do so for exactly the same reasons. They need to belong and they want to make meaning. We need to figure out what the world is all about and we need the company of others. It's simply that. Saturn is a really good example. It's a mass cult brand. For example, 45,000 people turned up to spend their holiday, their vacation time at the factory in Tennessee, instead of going to Disney World or the Grand Canyon. Now, why would they do that? It's because they wanted to meet other people who own Saturns. They wanted to meet the rest of the Saturn family. They wanted to meet the people who made the car. The people who made the car wanted to meet them. And the people who ran the Saturn business knew that.
This summer,
they not only knew it, they turned it into an ad, which only brought more people into the Saturn family.
We called it the Saturn Homecoming. They could see where the idea for a new kind of car company had taken shape, and we could thank them for believing we could do it.
And they created a great meaning system for Saturn. In those fantastic commercials, their meaning system was based on old-time values of community. It was a kind of an icon that America yearned for but couldn't find anymore.
And that's the object of emotional branding, to fill the empty places where non-commercial institutions like schools and churches might have once done the job. Brands become more than just a mark of quality. They become an invitation to a longed-for lifestyle, a ready-made identity.
The campaign for iPod is remarkable. When I see the poster as I'm passing by, when I go on the website and it comes to life, and I hear the music track going, and then when I put my little iPod earpods on, and I see the white cords against my black jacket, I'm in that poster, and the poster is me. And then the music, my music, comes over my iPod, and it's a brand experience.
When you listen to brand managers talk, you can get quite carried away in this idea that they actually are fulfilling these needs that we have for community and narrative and transcendence. But in the end, it is, a laptop and a pair of running shoes. And they might be great, but they're not actually going to fulfill those needs. But which serves them very well, because of course that means that you have to go shopping again.
Ironically, this new, more spiritual trend in branding has ultimately put enormous pressure back on ad agencies. There are only so many big concepts to go around. Starry-eyed advertisers looking to become the next big thing are constantly dropping one agency for another. This churning of accounts has left hundreds of agencies weakened and vulnerable to takeover by one of 6 mammoth holding companies. Most notably, Publicis, Interpublic, WPP, and Omnicom. Each has snapped up dozens of advertising, PR, and market research firms, consolidating their operations and slashing jobs. This cutthroat economic climate means that for many ad agencies, their most important pitch of all is for themselves.
There's a lot of fear in the agency business right now. They are basically becoming commodities, and they're trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves. And if you boil down, if you went to the websites of the top 20 ad agencies and you looked at what each one uses as the slogan or the motto that they think differentiates themselves from their competitors, these things read almost absurdly like the same sentence cast a lot of different ways.
Deliver knockout creativity.
Boy, does the world need breakthrough ideas.
Kevin Roberts is the CEO of Saatchi & Saatchi. What used to be the biggest player in the ad business is now a small subsidiary of a giant French holding company. In the weeks before we saw Kevin Roberts, Saatchi took a major blow, losing $185 million in billings from its client Johnson & Johnson, including the Tylenol account that Saatchi had held for 28 years. But Roberts is undaunted. He thinks he's found a path to revive Saatchi's fortunes.
You feel the world through your senses, the 5 senses, and that's what's next. The brands that can move to that emotional level, that can create loyalty beyond reason, are going to be the brands where premium profits lie. So we figured out what the answer was, that there was something in outstanding brands.
What sets Roberts' big idea apart from his competitors is its boldness. He claims he has discovered the formula to turn nearly any product into an object of devotion.
That there were brands that connected, and there were brands that people loved. They didn't like them, they didn't admire them, they didn't respect them, they didn't use them. None of that wimpy-wumpy stuff. They loved them.
Roberts calls his big idea love marks.
What is a love mark?
A love mark is a brand that has created loyalty beyond reason, that's infused with mystery, sensuality, and intimacy, and that you recognize immediately as having some kind of iconic place in your heart.
Happy holidays.
Well, where's the mystery in a Cheerios?
Oh, Cheerios is full of mystery. You don't think that people just eat these and put them in a bowl, do you? And that's not how they eat them anyway. Most kids play with them. They make stories up about them. They imagine them. We shot this great commercial with a grandma and a baby.
You know how much Grandma wanted to be here for your first Christmas? She came a long way. You see, Grandma lives way down here. Brian, your cousin, he's a little bit older than you. He lives here in Chicago.
You can build mystery as long as you believe in the story.
But no matter where Grandma lives, we'll always be together for Christmas.
Happy holidays from Cheerios.
You just ate Dallas.
We've moved from brands into experiences. Look at Tide, for instance, in the US. Tide's no longer a laundry detergent. It's not about getting clothes clean anymore. All detergents get your clothes clean. Tide's about a much deeper thing than that. It's an enabler. It's a liberator. It's, I guess you think about moving Tide from the heart of the laundry to the heart of the family.
Take me home, yeah, to my family.
I guess so. But how many brands ever really succeed in creating loyalty beyond reason?
There are few examples when advertising really does cast a Svengali spell. AT&T has done it, Hallmark has done it, Coca-Cola has done it, but most of the people who've tried to make emotional connections with consumers over the years, by far the vast, vast majority, have failed. They've gone down in flames.
Think about it this way. Instead of saying that's so cool, you'll say that's so song.
Just 6 months after it was first conceived, Song Airlines is in the skies. What began as a new way to market Delta's lower-cost flights has emerged as a company-wide culture, an ethos imprinted onto every available surface.
You can never be the only carrier or the only product offering a certain attribute for so long. So what we're trying to do with Song is there is a spirit that you can't copy. There is that emotional bond that we are trying to get with our customers that cannot be copied.
We are not an airline, we are Song.
I think Song, is about a lifestyle. It's more than an airline. Our translation is we want to create a movement. We want to create a movement of people that are going to have an emotional connection with this company.
Song hired one of the world's leading branding agencies to create a name and a look like no other airlines.
The logo is the easy part. It's everything else. It goes from the ticket jacket to the boarding pass to the screen on the kiosk when you check in to what's on the back wall behind that kiosk when you check in to what goes on the screen that says what time your flight is leaving to what the gate area looks like. Then you move on board the plane. What does the outside of the plane look like? What does the inside of the plane look like? That means carpet. That means bulkhead patterns in front of the seats. What goes on the baby changing table in the lab? What does the lab smell like?
Song not only branded their planes, they branded their people. Instead of holding job interviews, Song auditioned their flight attendants, then taught them how to be Song, giving them scripts for what to say and how to act.
Song is becoming an adjective at our airline, so we've got an expression, you are so Song. We can never do anything that's off song or off tune. It has to be on brand.
Do they kind of teach you to be Song?
Oh no, we had Song in us before Song was Song.
So they give you more permission to be Song.
They were like, you are so Song, bring it, show it. Right?
Bring it on.
Be it, be Song.
Have you ever done anything that you were being and it turned out it wasn't Song? No, you're just so Song. In your natural state,
always,
you just live
always.
Song.
When I'm sleeping, when I'm eating, when I'm
You're
breathing,
born
when
Song.
I'm talking, I'm Song, baby.
But despite Song's enthusiasm, there's reason to wonder if they are breaking through the clutter. A dozen actors with Song TVs strapped to their stomachs got lots of puzzled stares in the streets of Boston.
I'm not sure, but I'm either really drunk or some strange shit going down.
But so did every other walking billboard. They've opened a new Song concept store in Boston, but it seems like one more distraction in a giant mall. And it may have raised more questions than it answered.
Digestible.
So you're an airline?
Yes, we are.
Or a travel agency?
We're an airline.
Can consumers see through all of this brand experience to the product Song is supposed to be selling?
Okay. So something new. You're welcome. Have a great day.
If you scratch the self-confident surface of advertising, you'll uncover an unnerving anxiety. Is any of this really working? There's an aphorism as old as advertising itself. I know I'm wasting half my ad dollars, I just don't know which half. What works, when does it work, and with whom? The whispered truth on Madison Avenue is that despite enough studies to fill a library, still, nobody really knows.
Ladies and gentlemen, the executive producers and stars of NYPD Blue, past and present.
This is the financial bedrock of the advertising industry, called the upfronts, where every year, network TV executives present their coming fall season and its stars, and advertisers line up to buy commercial minutes.
Past and present.
But in recent years, the model has begun to break down.
Where else in the world can you be convinced to pay more for a commodity that is experiencing diminishing returns?
Giant advertisers like American Express are losing faith in the traditional 30-second ad.
We as advertisers are paying more to reach less. Now, the definition of insanity is to continually do the same thing over and over and expect different results, right?
television audiences are watching fewer ads. The networks are losing viewers to cable, and the appearance of digital video recorders like TiVo now allow people to zap the ads altogether.
Wow, that is clear. What's your answer?
Advertisers are frightened. I think they're sort of deer in the headlights. What do we do? Within, a matter of 5 years, we will have a huge percentage of the country will have this technology. 5 years, isn't a lot of time in terms of creating new models.
So what countermeasure have advertisers come up with to the remote-wielding viewer?
Aside from the stuff that I got at J. Crew, I went to French Connection. These are from Clark, Steve Madden. And I got you some great eyewear from Ray-Ban.
If the audience is skipping commercials to get to the programs, why not become part of the programs themselves?
If I was starting Friends today, instead of it taking place in a coffee shop, a generic coffee shop, if you were Starbucks, wouldn't it be great to have them meet in a Starbucks? You would never have to mention cappuccino. It would just be there.
Starbucks may have missed that opportunity, but the world's largest coffee chain caught a break on the next one. In the big-budget Hollywood movie I Am Sam, Sean Penn's character doesn't just happen to work at a Starbucks.
That's a wonderful choice, Bruce.
Starbucks becomes a key character in the story.
I need to make coffee. I need to pay my lawyer.
The idea of taking a brand and integrating all of its assets into an idea where it becomes a hero. Let's look at Castaway, for example. We open up getting on a plane. The plane crashes. All but one person is killed.
4 years ago...
How bold was that of Fred Smith, the founder and chairman of FedEx? A, to allow it, but to do it himself.
Terrible and tragic day.
And at the end of the film, not only did we deliver the packages, but we found romance. How much better could you feel about the brand?
Ad Age magazine dubbed this alliance between New York's ad men and Hollywood studios Madison and Vine. It is the integration of entertainment with advertising in a partnership that often begins before a show is even conceived.
Meanwhile, Samantha had used her pushiness to parlay her new man's hit off-Broadway show into a hot on-Broadway poster.
To mate a brand with the once commercial-free HBO series Sex and the City, Absolute Vodka and HBO writers worked out a storyline in which one of the show's characters finds his way onto an Absolute billboard. HBO got to use the brand's name in a key plot twist, and Absolute got unprecedented access to HBO's upscale audience.
Guess what I'm drinking? An Absolute Hunk.
They created a drink called the Absolute Hunk.
And you're delish.
So we went to the producers of Sex and the City, and we said, okay, we've got a real product and a real drink called the Absolute Hunk. We want you to weave an entire storyline around this drink and this product, so that it is unmistakably the conversation piece on Monday morning at the water cooler.
Wow.
It was quite the buzz.
The way God and Madison Avenue intended.
There are agencies, for instance, in Hollywood who go through every script before it is produced and find specific opportunities for automobiles, for beer, for virtually any product that you might want to name.
One such agency is called Integrated Entertainment Partners, itself a marriage of ad executives and entertainment heavyweights like ex-Disney president Rich Frank, who came out of retirement on his Napa Valley vineyard to grab a piece of the action.
The networks cease being able to generate the money to keep their shows going. They will be forced to change.
What we're talking about essentially is how do we look at this coming season shows. We've started to look at the pilot season to see what looks like that's new, that's coming up, and that would look good for Toyota.
IEP looks for ways to integrate products into programs.
We've all heard about The Contender this week, the DreamWorks Mark Burnett show with Sylvester Stallone as the Donald Trump character. Right. This show being a show about amateur boxers. How would that work for you guys in terms of brand?
The first thing we look is there a strategic fit with our vehicles. So let's see, boxing, it's tough and our vehicles are tough. Is that strong enough? of a match to make to get a good message across. What we're looking for is, it's obvious why this vehicle is the only vehicle that should be placed this way. And then
progress is slow. There are still cultural barriers between Madison Avenue and Vine Street.
It's an uneasy alliance, if you will, and it's being driven, by these economic imperatives. My business model's broken, yours is broken. Maybe we can lean against each other and make it better. Well, should I trust you? Can I trust you? What do you get out of it? What do I get out of it? Just give me your money and don't try and influence the creative process.
Cheers. Cheers.
Neither advertisers nor broadcasters are quite sure how much these integrated ads are really worth. Some predict the whole experiment will backfire. Have advertisers finally gone too far?
Can we get a couple more Sierra Mist?
There's no secret that the American public and the public of every society on the face of the earth is willing to consume crap. They consume crap, from their cupboards and pantries, and they consume crap on television. But they're very particular about which is which, and they don't want to see them conflated. And they don't want the purity of their telecrap to be adulterated by merchandising of the fast food crap, and they will rebel.
But there is little evidence so far of an uprising among consumers or Hollywood creatives. In fact, more and more deals are being struck. This summer, the USA Network broadcast a movie called The Last Ride, written for the Pontiac GTO and paid for by the General Motors Corporation. Variety magazine called it little more than a 2-hour infomercial designed to sell muscle cars.
If you can tell that it was advertising within the context of content, it didn't work. Okay, it's not seamless enough.
Pontiac is proud to bring you the all-new 2004 Pontiac GTO.
You can't talk about brand. It's all about how the writer and brand engage in that very, very interesting narrow space so that it feels natural.
Oh, no, it's not product placement. No, it's the seamless integration of merchandise and narrative. No, it's product placement. And whatever kind of, MBA euphemism that you want to attach to it, it's still product placement.
Some advertisers are venturing even further into programming. BMW Motors took the first plunge in 2001, developing a new form. A perfect hybrid of ad and movie. BMW was not only the sponsor, but also the creator.
They had these 8-minute films shot by directors like Guy Ritchie, starring people like James Brown and Madonna.
If you'd keep your eyes on the road instead of on me, we might be getting somewhere.
And they were beautiful little stories. BMWs had starring roles, they played integral parts in the plot lines, and they put these films on the internet. It's advertising as a piece of entertainment in and of itself that people not only will tolerate, but will actually go in search of. And BMW sales went dramatically through the roof in the years after these films aired.
2.
You have a reservation?
Superman.
I don't see anything.
Might be under Man of Steel.
Man of Steel. Oh, yeah, Man of Steel.
American Express, with one of the biggest marketing budgets in the world, has followed suit.
How did you possibly miss this shot?
In the last 10 years, they've cut the portion of their budget devoted to television ads by more than half. Instead, they're pouring millions into a series of what they call webisodes, starring their corporate pitchman Jerry Seinfeld and directed by A-list Hollywood veteran Barry Levinson.
We're launching a new medium here. That should be central to everything we talk about out there in the market. This is about, because that's where Jerry's excitement has come from. He has been proud to be part of, creating something brand new here.
And we're going to have an online advertisement that's going to pop up at the end of watching the webisodes, which is going to prompt people to apply for the card. We're going to get a lot of learnings to see what's sticky about the site, what's engaging, and then what can we carry forth to other future experiences like this, because this is all about interacting with the users in new ways.
We did it because consumers want to be entertained. It has an American Express message built in. We think it's built in a fairly seamless way. It doesn't interfere with the enjoyment of the entertainment. So the consumer gets something, and they start to see the value of a relationship with American Express. We don't just come forward with what we want to sell. We engage you with things that you want in terms of the entertainment.
But I'm invulnerable to damage, theft,
or things bouncing off of a superhero's chest within 90 days of purchase.
Yeah.
The boundaries between content and advertising are blurring in nearly every popular medium. Rock stars like Sting are partnering up with big brands and debuting their songs in advertisements as a way of reaching a wider audience. Even anti-establishment icon Bob Dylan starred in a hybrid of music video and ad for Victoria's Secret and got his CD stocked in their lingerie stores to boot. The times they are a-changin', some fear for the worse.
Once a culture becomes entirely advertising friendly, it ceases to be a culture at all. It ceases to be a culture worth the name. It has to have the constant mood that shoppers require. There has to be a kind of muzak playing in the background all the time. Now you think back to those dramas, those comedies that have really stayed with you, that have moved you tremendously, that you want to see again, that you think about for days. Well, those kinds of works are increasingly unlikely when the stuff that's on TV basically functions to sell Pepsis, to sell Nikes, to sell selling, to sell consumption.
This is the same idea as a focus group, just a really, really small group.
Far away from the boardrooms of the entertainment industry, in places like this nondescript office park outside Boston, the nitty-gritty work of selling starts with a simple questionnaire about bread.
And now, what do you see as the disadvantages to eating grain-based foods?
Today, faced with a nation hooked on low-carb diets, the baked goods industry needs to find out just how Americans feel about their products.
Okay, I'm going to read you some different emotions. I've got a whole list of them here. For each one of them, I just want you to tell me yes or no as to whether or not you think you feel that emotion when you're eating white bread. Okay? The first one is accepting. Do you feel accepting when you're eating white bread?
Yeah, I would say yes then.
Affectionate?
No.
Lonely?
No.
Disappointed?
No.
Afraid?
No.
Trusting?
No, I don't think that would be an issue.
Would you feel uncertain?
Yeah, a little uncertain. I've got one question.
Uh-huh.
Can I ask a question? The question was, when you eat bread, do you feel lonely? Have you found people say yes, they feel lonely when they're eating bread?
Not a lot on this one.
Welcome to the strange world of market research.
Now, we have to be careful because that's not politically correct to say women and inside.
Where those who claim to have figured out the hidden desires of consumers are treated as gurus.
We all come from a woman. We all spend 9 months inside of a woman. So women are expert in the inside. Translation, when a woman buys a car, the first thing she is looking at is, do they have cup holders? You know,
Dr. Clotaire Rapaille lives in a baronial mansion in upstate New York.
Price-quality relationship.
Fortune 500 companies and their advertising agencies flock there to drink French champagne, admire Rapaille's many cars, and listen with rapt attention to his insights on the irrational mind of the American shopper.
And we have to understand for each product what is the dynamic behind that. What is it that people are really buying there? We still have people that buy things that they don't really need. Sometimes a product is not expensive enough.
What sets Rapaille apart from many other market researchers is his belief that consumers are driven by unconscious needs and impulses.
My experience is that most of the time, people have no idea why they're doing what they're doing. They have no idea. So they're going to try to make up something that makes sense. Why do you need a Hummer to go shopping? Well, in case I need to go off-road. Well, you live in Manhattan. Well, you need a four-wheel drive in Manhattan. Well, sometimes I go out and this is... You don't need to be a rocket scientist to understand that this is disconnected. This has nothing to do with what the real reason is for people to do what they do.
Rapaille began his career as a psychiatrist in Europe studying autism.
My training with autistic children is that I had to understand what these kids were trying to tell me with no words, because they don't speak. Wow. So then that's part of my training. How can I decode this kind of behavior which is not a word.
Rapai claims that there are unconscious associations for nearly every product we buy, buried deep in our brains.
One of my discoveries was that when you learn a word, whatever it is, coffee, love, mother, the first time you understand, you imprint the meaning of this word, you create a mental connection. And so actually every word has a mental highway. I call that a code, an unconscious code in the brain.
Corporations love the idea of buying a single key to the psyches of vast numbers of consumers, a simple code that lies behind millions of individual decisions. Rapai gave up psychiatry and says he has never looked back.
I have 50 of the Fortune 100 company as clients.
Tonight, Rapai has been invited to speak to the Luxury Marketing Council of America.
The premise of the council is to bring the smartest minds in marketing together and help us all figure out ways to get more money from customers with the most money.
Rapai has been commissioned by a handful of big companies like Boeing and Acura to break the code on luxury.
We're just delighted to have you with us.
Thank you. I don't believe what people say. So some people listen to what they say and they say, do you want to buy that? Do you want to do this? I don't believe what people say. I want to understand why they do what they do. I found this word, and with that I want to understand you guys. And this is the word. I hope I didn't make a mistake, but the right spelling?
To crack the code on luxury, Rapai conducts a series of focus groups.
I'm serious. That's what I want to understand, how you feel about it. And anything for me is interesting.
Money.
Money!
He takes his subjects on what he hopes will be a 3-stage psychic journey. Past reason, through emotion, to the primal core, where Rapai insists all purchasing decisions really lie.
We start with the cortex because people want to show how intelligent they are. So give them a chance. We don't care what they say.
When people try to sell you luxury things, what kind of word they use?
Well made.
Well made?
Nothing new there. And then we have a break. They're usually very happy with themselves. Say, oh, we did a good job, and so on. When they come back, now we go into the emotion. And I tell them, you're going to tell me a little story, like if I was a 5-year-old from another planet.
Once upon a time.
Exactly.
So suddenly they are into a mindset that is completely different. They don't try to be logical or intelligent. They just try to please a 5-year-old from another planet.
I will send you and your entire family to Maui.
They don't understand what they're doing anymore. Good. That's what I want. At the end of the second hour, when we go to the break, they say, this guy is crazy. What is he doing? I thought I understood what we were doing. Now I don't understand anything. I mean, I get paid to do that? This is excellent. This is what I want.
We chosen for a new reality show.
That's what it is. A reality show.
Right.
Wait, there's 19 of us?
They're gonna give
we all have our rooms? That's
They're going to give you $1 million. They want to see how you spend it.
Maybe
if
that's
you
what
waste
they're
it or
gonna
not.
Then when they come back for the third hour, then there is no more chairs. Oh, what is going on here? How come no chairs? And I explained to them that I would like them to try to go back to the very first time that they experience what we're trying to understand.
Rapai is hunting for our primal urges. He's after what he calls the reptilian hot buttons that compel us to action.
It's absolutely crucial to understand what I call the reptilian hot button. My theory is very simple. The reptilian always win. I don't care what you're going to tell me intellectually. Give me the reptilian.
So I'm going to turn the lights off now, and we're going to all relax together.
I want you to be in a mindset a little bit like the one you have when you wake up in the morning. You'll be surprised to see that things come back to your mind that you forgot for the time for 20, 30 years. It's amazing.
The scribbles of consumers in the semi-darkness, half-remembered words and pictures associated with luxury, somehow become Rapai's key to unlocking the luxury code.
Once you get the code, suddenly everything starts making sense. I understand why this car sells, this car doesn't sell. I understand why a small 29,000 Cadillac cannot sell. No, I understand why, because it's off code. Ooh.
Over the years, Rapai has told car makers to beef up the size of their SUVs and tint the windows, because the code for SUVs is domination.
Découvrez le caractère.
He told a French company trying to sell cheese to Americans that they were off code.
Par ses soins donne tout son goût au vieux pané.
In France, the cheese is alive. You never put the cheese in the refrigerator because you don't put your cat in the refrigerator. It's the same, it's alive. If I know that in America the cheese is dead, and I've been studying cheese in almost 50 states in America, I can tell you the cheese is dead everywhere. Then I have to put that up front. I have to say this cheese is safe, is pasteurized, is wrapped up in plastic. I know the plastic is a body bag because you can put it in the fridge. I know the fridge is the morgue. That's where you put the dead bodies. Eh? And so once you know that, this is the way you market cheese in America.
It just got easier to just say cheese.
One word that kept coming up is in the stories, and I think is a reach, reaching to the next level.
While Clotaire Rapaille and his clients continue their quest to crack the code on luxury,
it might be interesting to explore the difference between first class and world class.
Song Airlines is running out of time and money. A year into operation, the full marketing team convenes in Las Vegas to assess how the experiment in creating a lifestyle brand is working out.
On behalf of Song, I want to welcome everybody here to Las Vegas. This time last year, this airline was a project. We had to create a brand, a product, an identity, and everything that is Song today out of absolutely nothing. This team has done an incredible job of introducing the brand called Song, this new airline.
But there are clouds on the horizon. Parent company Delta is losing billions of dollars, and Song's marketing budget has been drastically cut. The intangible thing called Song must deliver some tangible results. To do so, it must penetrate the distracted minds of Americans. The news so far is mixed.
Right now, the greatest thing that you've done so far is build a really solid brand identity for yourself that's coming through completely clearly in the advertising. People are completely identifying with it.
But while people are responding to the advertising, many consumers don't know what the advertising is for.
In terms of overall recall, 35% of our sample felt that they had seen you somewhere. Where we do start to see a slight problem in terms of which airline do you think this advertising is for. We're losing almost 50% at that point. So what we're calling our true recognition figure is those people who both saw the advertising and were confident and knew that it was for Song, and that was 15% of our sample.
Making matters worse for the Song marketing team, runaway success JetBlue has decided to go after the same markets as Song.
This one was unique. Boston Herald, which is kind of like New York Post or New York Daily News, more of a tabloid-ish newspaper in Boston, sold their front page. They actually allowed hard news to be pushed off the cover. So the entire cover looks just like a Herald cover, and if you're walking by a newsstand and you saw it, you were like, wow, JetBlue must really be important because they're on the cover of the Herald, when they really weren't.
Song cannot compete dollar for dollar against JetBlue, so they must be more nimble.
I think we're very much a guerrilla military force going out and fighting against the big guys. We're going to have to pick and choose our battles and do it wisely, placing media in places where you wouldn't necessarily expect an airline to be.
Handing out at concerts branded earplugs.
We like the scratch and sniff new plane smell.
Nightclub hand stamps. So instead of getting the club name, you would have the Song logo.
The fictional story where someone in need gets an invitation to a mystical villa on a little-known island off of Italy's coast. What does that have to do with Song? This is just one example of a story that might come out from Songbooks.
With few bankable ideas, Song's marketing effort more than ever will depend on its TV commercial. A few weeks later, the Song team flies out to Los Angeles to hear consultant Andy Spade describe his final vision for the commercial.
We can also introduce, like from the side, like that girl running through, like this little kid runs by, and then suddenly out of nowhere comes, this other woman who's kind of running through camera. So all these people are going toward this gate, which is obviously somewhere. These are happy people. It's like, these are happy people. We're almost a voyeur watching these happy people running through this thing, and we're boarding them now. And I feel like you look at that and you'll just say, wow, this thing is about these things.
Spade is scanning headshots for faces that exude the essence of Song.
I thought models are wrong. Yep. Real people are wrong because it makes it very kind of pedestrian. Real people, but they looked like they were happy. Not real people like LA law people. They feel very Song.
Yeah.
She feels very Song. He feels very Song.
It's definitely coming together.
It just brings you, to this place, but not being weird.
Right.
Magical without being like surreal is kind of a tough thing to pull off.
Exactly.
It's sure as hell hard to describe. So
It's very hard to describe. That's why it sounds corny saying it,
Yeah.
but the
No,
pieces
but
are coming
It's
together.
just happy.
Spade's ad finally went on the air, but it may have been too little too late. Though Song has built loyalty, its parent company, Delta, is careening towards bankruptcy and may bring Song down with it. In Tuxedo Park, New York, Dr. Rapai is also nearing the end of his process. He's ready to unveil the code on luxury.
You can change the content.
Rapai's clients, who represent industries as diverse as insurance, automobiles, and fragrances, are filled with anticipation. Having together paid several $100,000, they are convinced the code will give them a competitive advantage no matter what they're selling.
I think the code we discover was there already a long time ago and is going to be around for generation and generation.
We were not allowed to see the actual code. Its secrecy is worth a lot of money to Rapai's customers.
The content might vary again, but the structure is the same.
But the clients, many of whom have worked with Rapai before, are enthusiastic.
So far, you're sold on what he's doing?
Yes, I strongly believe in what he's doing. Strongly.
Mark Salmon is the vice president for development at Firmenich, a Swiss fragrance and flavor designer.
We need to absorb the code, check it, create products that are in code. Try to understand, looking at what is existing, what are the on code and off code.
We're here because we are always looking for ways to be more competitive in the marketplace.
Blake Emery is an executive at the Boeing Corporation, which has been working with Dr. Rapai for almost a year.
The interior of our new airplane, the 787 Dreamliner, much of that interior is based on research that we did with Dr. Rapai. Everything you see has an overt improvement, but there is also a hidden, unarticulated itch that we're scratching. And I can't give you an example of those.
So in other words, the bigger bin, if you find out
see, there's an
people
obvious...
see the bin as mommy, so then you make the bin shaped like mommy, so now they get mommy out of it? Or is there another feature somewhere?
Once this information gets out into the marketplace, once our interior is out there, the competition can copy it, right? You would say, well, why don't they just make a bin like that, and then they can do just what we did. However, if you don't really know why we did the bin the way we did, you will not do it right.
Of course, it's impossible to know if Rapai's excursions through the collective unconscious really uncover what drives us, whether to Boeing airplanes or any other product.
Thank you, Ma.
But even if he is onto something,
If we
you have to wonder about the net effect of reducing us to our most primal impulses.
What about the environment? If the lizard wants the Hummer,
Right.
and the lizard's not going to listen to the environmentalist,
Right.
then isn't it our job as aware people to get the reptile to shut up and appeal to the cortex,
All right.
to appeal to the mammal?
Now you see, the problem is that if you think, all right, the people that want to do good, not always do good. All right? So the people that want to do good, for example, let's say, okay, we need to make smaller cars, right, to protect the environment. Then nobody buys this smaller car. Why? Because they're too small. So then the result, if they're going to try...
Looks like I'm not going to win this one. After all, it's hard to argue against the reptilian brain.
The problem is we have to understand the unspoken needs of the people. It works. Good marketing research works. When we say it works, it means that marketers understand the real need of the customers, sometimes unspoken, and they deliver. Give me what I want.
Give us what we want. It has become the imperative that no corporation, or any persuader, can afford to ignore. That's why modern political campaigns have also come to rely on an army of pollsters and market researchers, all taking the moment-by-moment pulse of the man on the street.
I got a rule, which is cab drivers and antique dealers know more about America than anybody else. And when the cab drivers feel a certain way, I know I need to listen.
No one has imported the techniques and philosophy of market research into politics more successfully than Frank Luntz. His suburban Washington mansion is a shrine to the public zeitgeist.
Everything in here has a relationship to pop culture. It's what people prioritize in their lives. The truth is, as much as we want to focus on politics, the American people would rather watch television. As much as we want to talk about substance, they'd rather listen to music. So I have to know what they're watching, I have to know what they're listening to, and I got to know why.
Luntz has built his career on a simple idea. It doesn't matter what you want to tell the public, it's about what they want to hear. His clients have been some of the most prominent Republican politicians of the last decade. There was the mayoral campaign for Rudolph Giuliani in 1993, his work for Silvio Berlusconi in Italy, and especially his collaboration with Newt Gingrich on the famous Contract with America, the document that ushered in the Republican Revolution in Congress. Luntz gives his clients one consistent piece of advice: heed the public will.
There's one technique that's more important than anything else, and that's the technique of listening. And that's basically what I do. I ask a lot of questions, and I know how to listen. If an electricity company stood up and said, we want to do it for your benefit, we want to do it for our benefit, we want to do it for everyone's benefit, and so we have a better approach to efficiency and to environmental cleanliness. Is that kind of language positive or negative to you? Positive. By show of hands.
Tonight, Luntz's client is not a candidate, but a Florida utility wanting to build public support for a change in how it's regulated on the environment.
I know that the public is very down on corporate America in general, and they're down on power companies. So what is the language? What is the information? What are the facts? What are the figures that would get Americans to say, you know what, my electricity company, it's okay? 21st century technology. 1, 2, 3, 4. 21st century approach.
Luntz's specialty is testing language, finding words that work.
Integrity. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Reliability. There's the other one. If an electric company can demonstrate accountability, responsibility, and reliability when it comes to the environment, will that make you feel better about them?
Yes. It's an art that even his political opponents grudgingly admire.
Frank Luntz doesn't do issues. He does language around issues. He figures out what words will best sell an issue. And he polls them, and he tests them, and he focus groups them, and he comes up issue by issue with how to talk about it and how not to talk about it.
If the language works,
Right,
language
absolutely.
works.
No, it's just amazing.
Luntz has sold his corporate and political clients the idea that a few carefully chosen words can make all the difference. But he's not just looking for any words. Luntz's quarry are those words that grab our guts and move us to act on an emotional level.
It's amazing that those two words,
Constantly.
almost everything that we do, come up at the top.
So why do you think that companies don't use them enough?
I don't know.
80% of our life is emotion, and only 20% is intellect. I am much more interested in how you feel than how you think. How you think is on the outside. How you feel is on the inside. So that's what I need to understand. You're going to use these to register whether you agree or disagree, whether you believe or disbelieve. The dials go from 0 to 100.
On one hand, you have wind, which has no fossil fuels associated with it.
To get at his subjects' gut feelings, Luntz has them register their moment-by-moment responses to a speech by a power company executive. Republicans are on the red line and Democrats on the green. Luntz is watching for both sides to meet in an emotional crescendo.
Change fuels, there would be a number of things that are available.
Climbing, changing fuels.
Phase out of older, less efficient plants, and they would be replaced.
Bingo, look, phasing out of older official plants. He's now up into the mid to upper 70s with that. You're replacing the bad with the good. It's almost like in with the good air, out with the bad. That might be an analogy that we might want to try instead of the automobile analogy. This is going to work. Watch, this will work.
Technology such as hydroelectric power, wind energy, geothermal energy, nuclear energy.
Check it, I told you. The words work. The words apply to the policy. This is how we're going to sell it.
Output-based standards.
Look at this. Hold it. Stop.
By the end of his session, Luntz thinks he's found the language his client can use to create a groundswell of public support.
And I'll be able to walk to this electricity company on Monday and be able to say to them, your policy makes sense, and here's the language to explain it. That was the eureka moment. When I watched people nod their heads, I watched them look to each other, and they were willing at this point to fight for this position.
But watching Luntz work, I couldn't help wondering, do the words he's found help the public see the issue more clearly, or do they disguise it? Is Luntz listening to us so his clients can give us what we want, or so he can figure out how to make us want what they have to sell?
You're ducking the question. You're ducking the reality test.
This is a guy who is merchandising ideas and merchandising a movement and merchandising a political party. And in many instances, the words that he says are the ones that resonate, are ones that obscure to some extent the issue.
The right name makes the policy sell better. It's just like putting a name on a bar of soap or any other commercial product. It matters what you name things.
Journalist Nicholas Lemon wrote a profile of Luntz in the New Yorker magazine called The Word Lab. He described how Luntz once turned public opinion simply by replacing the name estate tax with the more emotionally charged death tax.
As far as I can tell, in the entire developed world, every single country had an estate tax, and it was completely uncontroversial all over the world. And it is clearly the case that this construction, this rhetorical construction of calling it the death tax, took it from the realm of something everybody was for and in a just unquestioned way into something that most people seem to be against and is on its way to being eliminated.
Look, for years, political people and lawyers, who, by the way, are the worst communicators, used the phrase estate tax. And for years, they couldn't eliminate it, but the public wouldn't support it because the word estate sounds wealthy. Someone like me comes around and realizes that it's not an estate tax, it's a death tax because you're taxed at death. And suddenly, something that isn't viable achieves the support of 75% of the American people. It's the same tax, but nobody really knows what an estate is. But they certainly know what it means to be taxed when you die. I'd argue that is a clarification. That's not an obfuscation.
Luntz has admonished Republican politicians to talk about tax relief instead of tax cuts, and to replace the war in Iraq with the war on terror. He once told his party to speak of climate change, not global warming.
What is the difference? It is climate change. Some people call it global warming, some people call it climate change. What is the difference?
It apparently made enough difference to Republicans that they began to use climate change almost exclusively.
It caused climate change.
The President's Global Climate Change Initiative.
Climate change research.
And we must address the issue of global climate change.
I don't argue with you that words can sometimes be used to confuse, but it's up to the practitioners of this study of language to apply them for good and not for evil. It is just like fire. Fire can heat your house or burn it down.
I'm optimistic about America because I believe in the people of America.
Still, the rise of consultants like Luntz has led to an increase in the emotionality of American political campaigns.
We are a country of the future. We're a country of optimists. We're the can-do people.
More and more, electioneering, particularly political advertising, has left behind facts for visceral appeals.
If you're looking for an example of how advertising is a really corrosive force in society, I advise you to look away from consumer product advertising and just look at political advertising, because it's a stain on our democracy. You know, you're selling soup or soap or oatmeal. One thing you basically have to do is tell the truth. Not the eternal truth, but the factual truth. So, by and large, advertising is essentially truthful, except political advertising, which, year after year, and it gets worse every year, is just the artful assembling of nominal facts into hideous, outrageous lies.
Raising taxes is a habit of Kerry's.
He supported tax breaks for exporting jobs.
In fact, while consumers are protected by law from false advertising of products, politicians can legally say pretty much whatever they want.
John Kerry lied to get his Bronze Star.
For Bush, drug company profits come first.
The ads leading up to the 2004 election, according to many experts, were the most deceptive ever.
Pressured by fellow liberals, he's changed his position.
All this noise has worn many voters out. To fight political ad fatigue, marketers have had to get creative. The idea that emerged in a major way in this past election is a twist on an old strategy, reaching out to voters on a one-to-one basis. They call it narrowcasting.
We are at the threshold of a revolution in political communication. What we're about to see is the ability to send very directed messages to very small audiences on an ongoing basis anywhere in the country.
We're going to be helping participate with voter registration in a parade.
These canvassers for America Coming Together, a liberal advocacy group, did some of the first experiments with narrowcasting techniques in the run-up to the 2004 election. Every afternoon, ACT canvassers here in the key swing state of Ohio were given the names and addresses of potential voters. They were sent into the field with a lot of information about each of the voters they were visiting. Profiles compiled by computer from demographic data, including exactly what issues the voters were likely to respond to. Each ACT canvasser was armed with a Palm Pilot that could play a short, customized video.
If you don't mind, I just have a clip that's not even 1 minute that I just wanted to show you about some of the issues that I just mentioned.
This potential voter was being shown a movie about job losses for African Americans in Ohio.
African American unemployment has skyrocketed to a 10-year high.
Elsewhere, other Ohioans were seeing different video messages tailored to their own personal demographic profiles.
Ohio has gone backwards.
Sure has.
Right now, there are only a few different messages, but pretty soon, if all goes according to plan, they will be customized for dozens of different demographic groups.
If you want to get up to 51% of the vote, you probably have to assemble a coalition of 20 or 30 or 50 demographic groups. So as a modern candidate, you will want to have a strategy for how to communicate with each one of those demographic groups. You want a targeted ad on the gun control, on the pro-life, on the military, on the economic issues. You're going to want to have a message that's tailored for each one of those groups. If you don't do it, you're putting out broadcast ads in a narrowcast world.
But where did all this information come from? How did political parties and advocacy groups know whom to reach with what message? The answer to that question begins here. The Axiom Corporation of Little Rock, Arkansas, is one of the biggest companies you've never heard of. Somewhere in these acres of blinking computers is carefully guarded data about you. Not just your name, address, and phone number, but probably also the catalogs you get, the cars you've bought, and maybe even what shoes you wear, and whether you like dogs or cats. Axiom's information is culled from census data and tax records, those product surveys you answered, and customer records supplied by corporations and credit card companies that are Axiom clients. Axiom sifts all this data to produce lists of target consumers for their clients.
If you're a company, a bank, a retailer, what you would do is say you want left-handed people of a certain ethnic group, and they're going to be able to do a list for you. You can get marketing lists of Hispanics who make between $20,000 and $40,000 who are U.S. citizens. You can get marketing lists of people who suffer from incontinence and have bought those kinds of products in the pharmacy. You can get all sorts of things that can be very narrow.
Axiom divides all consumers into one of 70 different types they call life stage segments, encompassing everything from what hobbies you have to what products you buy, where you live to what you believe in. According to Axiom, I am a shooting star. 36 to 45, married, wake up early and go for runs, watch Seinfeld reruns, travel abroad, and no kids yet. We're working on the kids part, but Axiom probably already knows that. Their computers are programmed not only to figure out who we are now, but where we are going and when we will get there. What Axiom is promising is nothing less than the solution to clutter. Send us ads only for products we really want, and anticipate just when we will want them.
You can't just now take an ad and put it on TV and hope for the best.
You need to get smarter about your consumers. You need to understand their purchasing predisposition. You need to understand how they're changing. You need to understand more about them, and that's technology.
Of course, the prospect of finding the right audience at the right time is irresistible to politicians as well.
I'd like to welcome everybody to the grand opening of the new headquarters of the Democratic Party of the United States of America.
In recent years, both parties have bought data from Axiom and companies like it. The Republicans don't talk about how they use it, but the Democrats do.
But if I want to sit at my desk, pull up on the screen the state of Ohio, and say, who in Ohio says that education is going to be the number one issue they're going to vote on, 6 seconds later, 1.2 million names will pop up. I then have the ability to hit buttons and do telemarketing to them immediately, or to send emails to them immediately, send direct mail to them immediately, or actually send someone to their door to talk to them.
One Democrat found narrowcasting just in time. John Kerry's victories in the 2004 Iowa and New Hampshire primaries were national news, but few knew the whole story of Kerry's stunning comeback.
Repair shop today.
I'm really looking forward to campaigning in New Hampshire.
Kerry tuned up new support.
He was behind in the polls and couldn't find a way to reach voters through all that political noise.
We're going to win. We're going to make this.
But the Kerry campaign had discovered a way to identify and talk to thousands of voters who'd been turned off by political ads.
Online overnight.
It wasn't campaign workers who found them. It was a couple of off-the-shelf PCs sifting reams of demographic data. Overseeing the operation was a little-known Kerry consultant named Kenneth Strasma.
Democratic primary voters in Iowa and New Hampshire were getting called by 10 different candidates for months and months, and it was getting very hard to reach people. So what we did is we looked at all the information we had from the folks we'd called so far and came up with a Kerry voter profile, which gave us the percent likelihood that someone would say yes, they'd support Kerry if we called them.
This sort of voter profiling, which both parties used to chase down swing voters in the general election, incorporates behaviors we don't normally associate with voting, like whether you have caller ID, a sedan or a hatchback, or more than one pet. The thing about narrowcasting is that it gives politicians a chance to say things to some people they might not want others to hear.
You can take the most controversial message that maybe wouldn't work on TV, but still deliver it to the 20,000 people in a certain district who will respond favorably to it.
Oh, absolutely. There are some of the biggest motivators in terms of issues are also the most divisive issues. On one end of the spectrum, you've got abortion rights, pro-life, pro-choice, and you've also got gun control and gun ownership rights. And those are both messages that people aren't likely to go up on TV with in a national campaign because they're very polarizing. But there are advocacy groups on both sides who've gotten very good at figuring out where their voters who vote based on those issues are and getting a message to those people without necessarily getting a divisive message to the whole electorate.
Roy Barnes sold all us Georgians out.
In 2001, President Bush's chief strategist Karl Rove conducted a series of experiments in narrowcasting for the GOP. The following year, the state Republican parties put Rove's findings into practice. In Georgia, they were used in a campaign to unseat a slew of incumbent Democrats.
I mean, the flag did have something to do with it.
The GOP used the incendiary issue of the Confederate emblem on the Georgia state flag to galvanize a select group of usually apathetic male voters.
You mess with our flag, you pack your bag.
Targeting their message door-to-door and through telemarketing, the team drove high numbers of rural males to the polls and delivered a Republican sweep.
When you start sending messages which appeal to sort of, white people in pickup trucks, and then you're also sending messages to black people in Cleveland, and it's a qualitatively different kind of message, you're really trying to stir, we are really trying to appeal to those aspects of people which sees themselves as different from each other.
Instead of being Americans, we're sliced into 70 demographic groups. We might be sliced into hundreds of subcategories under that. And then the worry is that we don't share anything as a people.
The result is living in a society where people, rather than having an idea of the common good, increasingly see their own personal well-being or their own communities' or ethnicity's well-being as the essential issue of democracy.
Sorted and sifted, we slip easily into our demographic tribes. Each of us focused on our own list of needs and desires, which, after all, is exactly the way marketers want it. Because as long as we're thinking about ourselves, we're better consumers.
Take a look at advertisements per se. What is their ideology? What is their message? What do they value? What do they ask of us?
We see you.
There's no limit to what you can accomplish.
Commercials say to us endlessly, you come first.
Any way you want it. It will let out the seat for you.
I didn't have to leave home.
You are the focus of attention. You matter. An army of one, you see.
Because you're worth it.
It does feel good to live in a world where we come first, where our every desire is mapped, our every thought seems to matter. The Persuaders listen to us when others won't, and tell us we can be anything we want to be. Best of all, they make us feel powerful.
The consumer is now in total control. I mean, she can go home, she's going to decide when she buys, what she buys, where she buys, how she buys. Oh boy, they get it, you know. They are so empowered at every age. All the fear's gone and all the control is passed over to the consumer. It's a good thing.
Well, you know that it's going to be alright. I think it's gonna be alright. Everything will always be alright when we go shopping. Well, you know.
It was near the end of my tour through the landscape of persuasion that I came to realize how the problem of clutter finally gets solved. Marketers find a way so deep inside each one of us that it no longer feels like persuasion at all. Maybe we are in control. Once the market becomes the lens through which we choose to see the world, then there's no us and them anymore. We're all persuaders.
The secret of it all, the secret of all persuasion, is to induce the person to persuade himself.
Everything will always be alright when we go shopping. Well, you know that it's going to be alright. I think it's gonna be alright, alright. Everything will always be alright when we go shopping.
This report continues on Frontline's website, where you'll find a forum with Douglas Rushkoff and others on the new techniques of persuasion, why we're vulnerable, what it's doing to us, what we can do about it. A look at the concerns over the Internet's virtual marketing, and a look into the research on how cultural messages act on the brain.
People have no idea.
Plus Frontline's extended interviews with those featured in this report.
Develop immunities.
And a chance to watch the full program again online. Then join the discussion at pbs.org.
Next time on Frontline. They're rolling back prices.
Walmart has given an increase in income to every American.
Rolling back competition.
It's more efficient, more powerful. It is destroying competitors.
And rolling jobs overseas.
Walmart basically tells its suppliers, you need to move to China.
Walmart's putting people out of work. That's what it's done.
Is Walmart good for America? Next time on Frontline.
Frontline's The Persuaders is available on video cassette or DVD. To order, call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.
Frontline is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
This is PBS.
I got the world on a string.
Americans with credit cards, 185 million. Interest and fees paid to the credit card companies, 101 billion. Big banks holding all the cards, priceless. Some things money and power can buy. For everything else you want to know about credit cards, there's Frontline. Only on PBS. You want the truth. We'll help you find it. You want the whole story. We won't stop until it's uncovered. You want to think for yourself. We'll give you what you need to decide. Frontline. In a world full of questions, we answer to no one but you.
We're always looking for a new wall to kind of do our thing on.
They may not look it, but these guys are preparing a guerrilla operation.
Kind of just scope out for a good location, and wherever we end up, we end up. This is where we're going in this construction site right here.
At last they find the building they've been looking for. They line up the target in their sights. What's this covert mission all about? It's a new kind of urban warfare. A sneaker company's all-out battle for our attention.
You cannot walk down the street without being bombarded. You stand in an elevator looking at advertising in the corner of the elevator car, and you go to play golf and you go to pick the ball up out of the cup and there's an ad in the bottom of it, and you look up at the sky and there's skywriting, and you look at a bus passing and there's advertising, and you walk in Times Square and you go, is this Las Vegas on the Hudson? Am I trapped inside a pinball machine?
Welcome to the new American metropolis. Somewhere beneath all these ads is the city I grew up in. But over the last 20 years, it's grown a second skin, a twinkling membrane of commercial messages. Advertisers have become prospectors for new space in an ever more crowded landscape. Even a subway tunnel becomes the backdrop for an American Express promotion. But advertisers have a big problem. The more messages they create, the more they have to create to reach us. It's led to a vicious circle of clutter.
They are the ones who make clutter. They are therefore also the ones who are always trying desperately to break through the clutter. That's the line you always hear in ad agencies. We can break through the clutter with this. Well, every effort to break through the clutter is just more clutter.
You know, I have a quote in my book from an advertising executive who says consumers are like roaches. You spray them and
Welcome to the future. PBS Digital.
Frontline is made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
It's everywhere you look.
You cannot walk down the street without being bombarded.
They call it a clutter crisis.
Consumers are like roaches. You spray them, and after a while it doesn't work anymore. We develop immunities.
And the multi-billion-dollar advertising industry is in a desperate struggle to break through.
We don't just come forward with what we want to sell, we engage you with things that you want.
Advertisers have blurred the line between programming and product.
It's advertising that people not only will tolerate, but will actually go in search of.
The way God and Madison Avenue intended.
But how is advertising affecting our lives and the world around us?
Once a culture becomes entirely advertising friendly, it ceases to be a culture at all.
Tonight on Frontline.
I'm sure people ask you this all the time. What about the environment?
Correspondent Douglas Rushkoff takes you inside the changing world of the Persuaders.
A spring night in New York City. Two men hunt for just the right building.
Spray them, and after a while it doesn't work anymore. We develop immunities.
So what's an advertiser supposed to do? Stop advertising? That's the one thing they know they can't do, because the moment they stop trying to persuade us, we forget about them.
Once you're in the game, you can't stop, if for no other reason that the competition will eat you alive.
What advertising has always wanted to do is not simply to suffuse the atmosphere, but to become the atmosphere. It wants us not to be able to find a way outside of the world that it creates for us.
So this is the way our world fills up with advertising. For years, I've been studying and writing about what I call the persuasion industry. I've even worked in it. But I still can't say for sure where all this is headed. Where will the advertising arms race lead? To a world made of marketing? And what would that mean for us? I set out on a tour through the modern machinery of selling to meet some of the persuaders up close. My first stop? A downtown New York storefront.
I'm not singing.
I've been invited to a hip party. Or something that looks like one.
They serve this on planes?
What this really is the opening salvo in a marketing blitz for a new airline. They call themselves Song. Song is a subsidiary of Delta Airlines, but you won't find any mention of Delta here. Delta is old-fashioned air travel, and Song is their way of persuading us that they can compete with hip, low-cost carriers like JetBlue.
A lot of people ask us, you got to be crazy. You're starting an airline in the worst environment in the U.S., in the history of U.S. commercial aviation. And we were, and we are.
That process gets more and more complex.
Delta broke off a team of their best marketers and told them to start from scratch.
What's the kind of the creative idea that runs through each of these?
The first thing the Song team decided was that it wasn't enough just to launch a new airline. To get our attention, they had to invent a new culture around flying.
Which is to sort of capture consumers' imagination by...
But how do you do that?
Talk to me a little bit about why you chose the things you did. And
Song started with a trusted tool, the focus group.
The homework was choose images, words, things that capture what might be your ideal experience of traveling by air.
Before long, Song's research yielded a nugget. There was a large group of flyers whose needs and desires were being ignored. women.
The food, I think they could improve a lot.
It was an incredible insight to say that this could be the first airline that had, a real, understanding, much deeper understanding of women and women's interests.
The Song team created a detailed profile of their target consumer and even gave her a name, Carrie.
She's got 3 children, a husband. They both work. They have an SUV and a sports car, Neiman Marcus credit cards, but she shops at Target. She has got a propensity to read kind of high-end literature, but she finds guilty pleasure in People magazine, and she doesn't have an airline.
Here's our organic menus.
Song would have low fares, organic food, and more entertainment options, but most importantly, it would forge a real connection with women. To pull that off, Song turned to a pro, Andy Spade. Spade is the co-creator of the Kate Spade Company, a multi-million-dollar line of fashion accessories that caters to women like Carrie.
I think early on when you're shaping a new brand, you need those brand visionaries. He's got a gift, and he's had it from the very first time we started working with him, and that's why we love him so much.
What are they going to do in this day?
He gets us more than we get ourselves.
Like the 8-track player and this TV.
I bring ideas, kind of visualize ideas that companies have and give them kind of a substance and a texture and a life that they may not know how to create. And I bring that, I take their idea or their point of view, and I try to create this make it into something that's bigger, maybe emotional, maybe optimistic, maybe classical, maybe, happy.
I think that I'll just start by introducing, kind of the concept and what it is.
Spade's been charged with producing Song's TV campaign, the first impression the airline will make on many Americans.
All right, so why don't we start? Really create a campaign for Song that was spirited, that delivered on the benefits that we think are the most important. Do it in a way that's emotional. Do it in a way that I think is optimistic, because we believe that's part of the Song ethos. So we're going to take you through 5 different concepts and 5 different commercials that deliver on 5 different benefits which we believe differentiate Song from everyone else.
Spade is proposing to downplay the airline's new features in favor of something much more intangible, its soul.
There's a book called Lovers here, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book Lovers. I'll pass it around. But there's these sweet, sweet images. We were kind of inspired by this a few times of just people together, and mainly Godard and Truffaut movies and all those old French New Wave films, and then their American films.
When you're alone and life is making you lonely, you can always go downtown.
Spade's commercials will show no planes, no travelers, no low fares, no airline. This is an enormously risky strategy. These commercials, as planned, will consume almost 1/3 of Song's $12 million marketing budget. If the campaign doesn't connect, Song will just become part of the noise, and Delta, at the brink of bankruptcy, cannot afford for its new venture to fail. At least one member of Song's team is nervous.
Well, the risk is you invest an inordinate amount of money behind a message that is a fairly ethereal message that, as they say, doesn't feed the bulldog. I mean, this is a business. This isn't an art form. So we have got to ensure that it's communication that drives commerce, not just makes people feel good. The number one purchase driver for this category is, in fact, first price. The strategy is the everyday low-price airline that happens to have more style and everything else that we're doing.
The more we pulled back and tried to make it a very, very kind of literal delivery on a benefit, it lost that emotion, and we wanted to keep that emotion.
Spade isn't backing off. He's not content just to convey information. He's aiming for something bigger.
At the end of the day, you want to become a part of culture. And when you get to that point, you've created a huge success. And that's what all the great, I think, companies have done, from Virgin to Apple to others.
I think